of King County, and we support people with intellectual and developmental disabilities across their lifespan and also their parents and families. We're driven by the fundamental belief that everybody deserves to live the life of their choosing and to make the decisions as much as they can that control how they live their lives. Real access to education, meaningful employment, quality health care, genuine community connections. At our chapter, we offer information and family support, systems navigation. I don't know if any of you have ever tried to apply for DDA or Social Security. No fun. So we help with that kind of stuff. Systems advocacy, supported living for adults. We have a homelessness prevention program. I could go on and on. We have a lot of stuff. If you're a parent of a person with a disability, or if you're a person with a disability yourself, and you're feeling like you need some additional support, we would be a great place to reach out to. And almost everything we do is free, and there's no proving a certain level of need. If you call us and say you need some support, we're there to help. Any questions about the ARC before I move on? This is not what you're here for. I just want to make sure you knew who I was standing here in front of you. So let's, oh yeah.
Do you have to live in King County to get help from the ARC?
I mean, not really, actually. Like, our obligation is to the people of King County, but with any extra time that we have. And if you're here and you're not living in King County and you call me for help, I'm certainly going to help you. Yeah. And there isn't an ARC in Pierce County. There's one in Snohomish. There's like 6 or 7 others around the state, but Pierce doesn't have one. So a little bit about what we'll talk about today. We're going to talk about the legal basics of special ed. What is an IEP? Accommodations versus modifications. And I want to say something, this is pretty basic stuff, by the way, but my son was on an IEP for probably 7 years before I knew any of this. So I know it's beginner stuff and you all have kids with IEPs already, but it's not impossible to think you've gotten this far without actually knowing how it works, because I know I did. We're going to talk about accommodations and modifications, what that is and how they're different from each other. An IEP versus a 504 plan. We're going to talk about the entire IEP process, beginning to end, like the annual cycle, the 3-year cycle. Data, goal writing, and present levels of performance. Placement, like if a person's in general education versus a self-contained program. Challenging behaviors at school, is that an issue for anyone? Yeah. Options for dispute resolution if you're in a disagreement with the school, and working with the IEP team at the end. If we have a little extra time, we'll talk about that. If there's something you're hoping I'm going to address that is not on here, let me know. Is there anything missing? I'll try to work it in. Okay, anyone on the chat, feel free to let me know. Okay. Well, then I'm going to jump in. But like I said, questions are encouraged. So, and this is a list, these 10 tips is a list of what I think, if you know this stuff, then I really think it can increase your ability to effectively advocate and effectively engage. I know we all as parents want to participate, and I don't know if this has happened to you, how often you're told by the IEP team, your voice matters, you're such an important part of this team, and that means so much until you realize you have no idea what to say or how to do it. And so hopefully with this information, you can be that voice and be that advocate. The law. The law is dense and complicated and convoluted and long. I don't think most of us are in a position to really master the law. But my feeling is if you understand the spirit of the law, it can get you pretty far in your advocacy. There's two main laws, really. They're federal laws. So I could give this presentation anywhere in the country, it would be the same. The first one is Section 504. Section 504 of the Rehabilitation Act of 1973. It extends civil rights to students with disabilities. So it essentially allows students with disabilities at whatever they need to access their school. And second is IDEA, the Individuals with Disabilities in Education Act. And by the way, it's totally okay, take all the pictures you want, but I will give you these slides afterwards, so don't feel like you have to. But I didn't mean to call you out. You're welcome to do it. IDEA is the other federal law that guarantees a student a right to a free and appropriate public education. Because we know up until the 70s, kids with disabilities were not guaranteed a right to go to school. So this law says they have a right to an education, and this law says they have a right to whatever they need to access their education. And part of that is that our student has the right to access that education in their least restrictive environment. And we're going to talk a lot more about what that means later on. But when I say the spirit of the law, what I hope you take away from this is that your child has a right to be at school. They have a right to whatever they need to be successful at school, and they have a right to make substantial progress in their learning. So they have a right to not just be at a babysitter all day, but to actually learn. And I think if we know that as parents, we can really take our advocacy far. I made a joke about whose kids have trouble with behavior at school. For my son, behavior was a really big challenge in his early years. And it's really hard to be the mom of the kid who's hitting the teacher or making life difficult for everybody. And I always felt the need to apologize or to, I didn't want to push too hard. But when I'm reminded, no, it's his right. It's his right to be there. Of course, I don't want him to hit people, and I don't want him to make life difficult. But whether he does or not, there's federal law supporting his right to be there. So that's what I hope that you could take away regarding the law. What are your thoughts on that? We're going to talk more about what a student needs to access their learning, these accommodations. That's going to come up a little later. But the law, a child with a disability has the right to their education in their general education setting, and to make substantial progress. I used to have in this presentation, a pandemic doesn't release the schools from these, or the law. The pandemic didn't excuse anyone from these laws. Nothing does, as far as I know. This is an obligation of the school and of our federal government. Questions about that? Yeah.
Otherwise, this is federal law. Are you going to talk over state laws?
Well, there really aren't. Special education follows federal laws. So the state does have a few of its own things, and I'll talk about that, but the state, we do it, that's why if I went to Colorado, it would be the same thing. In fact, my sister has a therapy clinic in Colorado, and I do present to her parents, and it's the same rules. I think the states sometimes interpret things differently, and different districts, and then different schools, different principals, different classroom teachers. So then it starts to all look a little different. But the laws these are the main laws that they follow. Any other questions? Okay. I'm guessing everyone knows what an IEP is already, but let's just say it so that it's clear. It's an individualized education plan. It's a legally binding contract that the school is saying, this is what we're going to do for the next year. This is the progress he's going to make. This is the support we're going to give him. This is where he is now, his present levels of performance. These are his annual goals. That's where, this is where he is now. This is where we hope he'll be a year from now, right? What kinds of special ed and related services he's going to get, and we'll talk about that more. Accommodations, how much of the day he's going to spend with his typically developing peers versus his non-typically developing peers, and how often the services will be provided, where it's provided. We're going to talk about all of these things during this presentation. And it's worth noting, every IEP looks different. I've gone to IEPs throughout King County, IEP meetings throughout King County. Different districts use different formats, but they're always going to have this information. And I think it's important to note these things because every one of them are things you have a say in, and that are up for discussion. You don't necessarily get anyone who's sat in an IEP meeting knows you don't just get your way when you ask for something. It doesn't work like that. But these are all things that can be discussed and that can be decided as a team. That's basic stuff, but just want to make sure everyone understood what an IEP was. Okay. So let's talk about accommodations versus modifications. I told you earlier there's two laws. There's Section 504 and there's IDEA, the Individuals with Disabilities in Education Act. Section 504 allows for accommodations. It allows for you to have, let's say, a ramp if you need it to get into the building, or a button on the door so the door can open for you, or it could be a wiggle cushion because you have the proprioceptive needs, or it could be amplification because you're hearing impaired. It doesn't change anything that you're learning. It gives you access to the learning, if that makes sense. Alternatively, IDEA, that other law, allows for modifications to the curriculum. It says we were going to do extensive testing and determine that you can't do the work that the other kids in your grade level are doing. So we're going to modify the curriculum and teach you something different, teach you something that's at your level, if that makes sense. So students who are receiving special ed are generally getting modifications to the curriculum and accommodations to help them access their education. And I think a lot of times we as parents don't realize that we have these two things on our IEP. Every IEP has a list of accommodations near the end. It should. If it doesn't, that's a concern, but they usually do. I've never seen one not. But what I do see sometimes is the accommodations will be a very short list, like positive reinforcement or something very basic. But accommodations can be very lengthy. Does anyone have an example of an accommodation they've provided for their kid? Fidgets, access to fidgets, right. For a person who needs something in their hands, the IEP can require that they're provided fidgets. That's right. Frequent breaks, visual schedules, access to snacks, headphones, any of those things. That's exactly right. None of that changes what's being taught. My older son has ADHD. He needed a lot of accommodations, but he was able to do grade level work. On the other hand, my son who's autistic needs all these same accommodations, but also he can't do grade level work. So he has to be working on his own modified version of the curriculum. And an important thing to note is modifications can take them off a graduation track. Everyone graduates, but it can change the type of diploma that they receive. It doesn't matter so much when you're talking about little kids like elementary school, but as they start moving towards middle school and high school, if that's a concern of yours, I would be sure to bring it up to the counselor to make sure to find out if the school sees them as a person who's likely to graduate with the same kind of diploma you're considering. Questions about that? Modifications versus accommodations? Okay.
I have a quick question.
Yeah.
So if a student needed just the accommodation side, would that be more of the 504 plan or still both IEP and
That's exactly right. Thank you. It's almost like I planted you there. That's exactly what I was going to get at. So if your student only needs accommodations, that's a 504 plan. If your student needs both modifications and accommodations, that's an IEP. You're never going to have both a IEP and a 504 plan, because if you have an IEP, the accommodations are just built right in. Is there anyone here whose child is on a 504 plan? So you have some experience with it. It's different than an IEP. The IEP is protected by that IDEA, that massive federal law that gives students on IEPs a whole lot of protection and civil rights. That people say often an IEP has teeth and a 504 plan doesn't. And I'll explain what I think they mean by that. That first of all, there's a lot of money attached to IEPs. Schools get money from the government for every student who has an IEP. There's no money coming for 504s. So, of course, where are they going to focus their efforts and their energy? It's more here. Also, 504 plans are not setting goals. There's no thought that a student will one day not need a ramp to get into the school. There's no hope. They might one day learn to walk, but that's not the point of a 504 plan. No one's teaching that skill. No one's working towards anything. No one's tracking it at all. They're not tracking how frequently he needs the ramp. They're not tracking if he's even using the ramp at all. Alternatively, in IEP, every single thing is tracked so specifically. We're going to talk more about data as we go on, but we know every goal is measured and tracked, and we know exactly how they're doing on any goal at any given time. If they're not making progress, that becomes a financial issue to the school as well. If the school doesn't turn in paperwork on time, they could be fined for it. If the student is not getting the services they're supposed to get, the school can be fined for it. None of that happens over here. So my son had a 504 plan. It was fine for him. It was totally adequate. But it's just important to note that it is not like an IEP. What are your questions about IEP versus 504 plan? Great question. Do you mean with a 504? He said, who determines if it's not working? Great. That's a really good question. So we're going to talk a lot about that when we talk about data, but in an IEP, there's data being collected, so the data can tell a story of if it's working or not working. There's nothing like that with a 504 plan. So often what I end up hearing are parents saying, like, we have this 504 plan, I don't think he's using it. I don't know if anyone's ever knows it exists, and it doesn't seem to be solving the problem. But it's harder to track that because there's not, the same data collection type of thing. Did you have a question?
I don't know if it's a question or so much of a comment. My son was in a daycare earlier this year, and during one of the meetings that we had, they made a suggestion that we go through the Federal Way School District and have them evaluated
Yep.
through child science. And one of the comments of the lady at the daycare was, you should do this because you would rather have him be on an IEP than a 504 plan for his behavior. And I'm like, what?
Right. I mean, they say things like that, like you're supposed to know what to do with that information. The thing is that not everyone's eligible for an IEP, and we're going to talk about how to be eligible for an IEP. And there are pretty rigid eligibility requirements, and not everyone needs an IEP. If, the example with my son, he's now a college graduate, living alone, and has a full-time job. He didn't need special ed, but he needed extra time on tests, and he needed a quiet place to take his tests, that kind of thing, if that makes sense. So we'll talk about who determines which is the best one, like what's best for your kid. We'll get there. We'll talk about that in a second. Any other questions about IEPs and 504 plans? Often what I hear is kids who were on an IEP, they don't really need it anymore, so the school starts moving them to a 504 plan, which isn't always a bad idea. It takes away the modifications to the curriculum, but keeps kind of the support that was around them. So that is something that happens too. Okay. So let's talk about the whole process from beginning to end. And I told you, I was an IEP parent for 7 or 8 years and didn't understand all of this. So I feel like it's helpful to see it, even if you've been doing it for a long time. So let's talk about how a person starts receiving special ed. It starts with a referral. In your case, it was a referral to Child Find. Child Find is part of the school district. They do an evaluation. Or in my son's case, he came out of a birth to 3 center. We live up in Bellevue, so he came out of Kindering Center, and Kindering Center made a referral to Bellevue School District. The referral could come from you as the parent. It could come from a 3rd grade teacher, an 8th grade teacher. Anyone who thinks the student could benefit from special ed can make this referral. And I always recommend everything you do, any communication with the school should always be in writing, anytime. So I'll just keep saying that over and over. So you would send an email, or the school will send an email, or the early intervention place will send an email. we would like to request a special education evaluation for this student. And you might list out very briefly what your concerns are. I'm concerned about his vision, I'm concerned about his hearing, he's a late talker, he hasn't started walking yet, and I'm not sure what else is going on. Like, you don't have to be an expert, but just be, just list out what your concerns are. The school is going to decide if they're going to do an evaluation. And this can be hard. So my son, he's very heavily impacted by his disability. There was no challenge. They knew he was going to need it. But there are a lot of kids where it's more middle of the road, where the disability isn't quite so clear. And sometimes the school will say, we don't really think, he's just an average student. Or, yeah, he's struggling to read, but a lot of kindergartners struggle to read. We'll get there eventually. They are resistant to that. And that's the kind of thing where people call us and we try to help parents sort of advocate their way through that. You also have a right, I'll get to that in a second. For the sake of this conversation, let's assume that they do agree to evaluate. Most of you have probably gone through this. It will happen, it could happen in your home, it can happen at the school, at their daycare. If they're in school, it usually just happens during school. Somebody pulls them out of their classroom, the school psychologist will take them in a room and do a test. You don't really have much to do with it, although they might give you some forms to fill out as well. Then they're gonna call you all back into the room and give you the results of that evaluation. Personally, that's my least favorite part of the whole thing. I don't know how everyone else feels about that, but that one time every few years where they have to tell you like all the bad things, and it's very stressful and scary. But we'll get to that in a minute. Let's say they sit you all down and say, well, we did our evaluation and we don't think he qualifies for special ed. We tested him in math, in reading, in writing, in speech, in OT, in PT. He tested normal in all of them. In order to qualify, you have to have test 2.5 standard deviations below normal, which I'm not expecting anyone to know what that is, but the point is there is a hard and fast line. And if you test below it, you qualify. If you test above it, you don't qualify. That can be a frustrating experience if your kid is struggling, but they don't qualify. If that's the case, you have the right to what's called an IEE. That's an independent educational evaluation, where the school pays for you to get a third-party evaluation. So if you think, my daughter needs special ed in math, and you make this referral, and they agree to do the evaluation, they do the evaluation, and they say, no, she doesn't need special ed in math, she's fine. But you don't agree. You could get an IEE. The school will pay for her to go get tested in math somewhere else. But here's the frustrating part. Say you get that test, and the third-party person says, yes, definitely, she does need math, you are right. And you bring that back to the school does not have to take that advice. They have to consider it, but ultimately they're gonna do what they're gonna do. And we'll talk about what you could do if you and the school just can't agree on something a little bit later. But going back to the cycle, for the sake of continuing on, let's assume they did decide, yes, she does qualify for math. She qualifies in math, she qualifies in speech, and in OT, and in reading, but not in writing, and not in, I can't think of something else, vision, whatever. They'll tell you she qualified in these areas, she didn't qualify in those. The ones that she qualified in are what become the goal areas of her IEP. Does that make sense? So they're gonna do these they're gonna sit you down and give you the results. Next meeting is the meeting where you write the IEP. Have you ever been in a situation where they try to smush those two meetings into one meeting? It's not fun. I don't recommend it. They'll try to do a 2-hour meeting where the first hour is them telling you the results and the second hour is you trying to write the IEP. I recommend requesting they don't do that because it's separating them, right? It really helps. You go home, think about those results. Think about, did that sound like my kid? Did they get her essence? Do they understand her? What did I learn? What did I learn about her through these results? What did they seem to know about her now? And then come back a week later ready to problem solve and design an IEP. So that brings us to that IEP meeting. Now, I'm going to guess you've all been to IEP meetings, and it generally starts with them handing you a document that says draft across the top, but otherwise looks pretty much exactly like an IEP. And it's pretty much all written and ready. You sit at the meeting. They go around and read it and ask you if you have any questions, and then at the end, that's that. Is that pretty much right? That's always how it seems to be. Nothing wrong with that necessarily, but I always want to make sure that everybody understands that is a draft and it's just a suggestion. Was that me?
That was me.
Okay. Just a starting point. It is every single thing in that draft is up for discussion. I encourage you to ask for a draft ahead of time. They're not required by law to send you a draft, but they're required by law to try if you ask. So especially if English isn't your first language, or if you have a disability that makes reading hard for you, give yourself time to look at that draft, to spend time reading it through with a pencil, put a question mark next to what you don't understand, cross out the things you don't. And then when the meeting starts, you're really ready to engage in the conversation and share your concerns and discuss what's best. Although I don't know if you noticed, they seem to make the meetings like 45 minutes long, which doesn't seem, in my opinion, to be anywhere near long enough. So if it's not long enough, ask for an extension or a part 2. So that's the IEP meeting. In a perfect world, we sit there, it takes an hour or two, we hammer it all out, and at the end we're like, yes, this is great. Has anyone ever been in a meeting like that? I have, yeah. Totally. I've been to some amazing meetings, and it doesn't mean we agree on everything, but we talk through our concerns, we brainstorm problems together, like everyone's expertise is drawn on, including mine as the mom, including the speech therapist, the OT, the PT, everything. And we write a document and we all agree on it. I've also been at meetings that don't go like that, where we don't find agreement on things, where we're not able to resolve it before the meeting ends and everyone has to go home. They're going to ask you to sign something. The thing you sign is just an attendance form saying, yes, I was at this meeting. You're not signing necessarily that you agree with it, although the problem is ultimately they don't need your signature to do what they're going to do, unless it's the very first IEP ever. Then they do need your signature and they can't implement the IEP without it. But after that, you can agree, you can disagree, you can sign, you can not sign. They're going to do what's in the IEP, what they're going to do. And we'll talk, like I said, about what you do if that happens. But know that at the end of the day, if you walk out of that room disagreeing and refusing to sign, it doesn't stop the services from, it doesn't stop them from moving her to a new school or from switching to this many minutes of this or whatever. Do you get what I'm saying? Okay. But let's say we all agree, just to keep moving through the cycle. We all agree that on this IEP, it's great. We have the modifications, we have the accommodations, we have the how many minutes he'll be here, how many minutes he'll be there, all of that. Within a few days, the school district is going to implement it. It's a signed, legally binding contract, like we talked about. It's time to do every single thing that's in that IEP. If it says they get a fidget, that fidget has to be there. If it says they need a para, that para has to be hired. They don't really have a lot of time. They just have to do it. And if they don't, whatever's not there, whatever's not provided that's in the IEP puts them out of compliance. That could be hard to track, and we'll talk a little more about that. But they're going to implement it. They are going to collect data. We're going to talk about data. I think it's next. But every single goal on that IEP, they're going to be collecting data. So a seasoned eye might notice in a classroom, a special ed classroom, there's the para-educator following a student around with a notebook, doing tick marks, how many times they needed to be prompted to put their code on or whatever goal they're working on. That's the data that they're collecting for, to know whether this person is making progress on things. Every quarter, or the same time you get report cards, you would get progress reports on the IEP. It's a separate document, but you should get a thing. It almost looks like an IEP, but it tells you how they're doing on every one of their goals, which is a powerful tool for you because that is the way you know if it's going well or not, if it's working or not. If you look report card after report card and they're not making progress on their goals, at the beginning, he could put his jacket on independently 2 out of 10 times, and it's been 6 months, and he's still only at 2 out of 10 times. That's not okay. That's a sign to me as mom that I need to maybe have a conversation with school. What's going on? Why isn't he learning to put his jacket on?
Are the progress reports required?
Yes.
And if they don't give them, we just...
They're out of compliance. There was a lawsuit up in Issaquah where a person won a lot of money, and I was reading through it, and one of their things was that they had not gotten progress reports. But I will say this, I have found my son's progress report like mushed at the bottom of a backpack with banana all over. Like, I don't know that the schools are always super careful about making sure it gets in your hands. Oh, Sky, is that?
It's all email.
It's digital at this point. Right, okay, I just aged myself. I mean, if report cards come out, if your other kids are getting their report cards and you're not getting it, and you haven't seen a progress report, I would be asking for it. Yeah.
I'm a teacher.
Yeah.
So from that, I always get it directly from whoever the case manager is. So
That too. You have a
and
right to
I
get that.
pass it out at the same time. So
Smart.
you can always like go to whatever gen ed teacher
And ask for it.
and ask them because
Yeah.
they probably have seen it if it's going to get to your hands.
I hope you're getting them. But a lot of parents say that they've never seen one. And I don't know if that's because they're not getting one or they just don't know what it is when they're seeing it. You know, it's hard to say. But it is an important tool. I want to just like make sure I got all of these things.
Can you explain educational impact?
Yeah, I can. So the threshold to be eligible for special ed is that the disability has to have an adverse educational impact, which is sort of a vague term. And I think people can get caught up in that. So if you're one of those people where they're like, we don't think she needs special ed, and you're like, no, I really think she does, you're going to be debating whether whatever she has going on with her is having an adverse educational impact. And it's important to keep in mind, educational is not just academics. So we have kids, for example, who are doing fine academically, but like maybe social emotionally, they're really struggling. And I think you could make the case that that is also having an adverse educational impact. How can you learn if you can't get along with the people in your space? Or how can you do group work if you can't work in groups? So you could make that case in a lot of different areas, that there's that adverse educational impact. Our IEP is going to be rewritten every year, forever, until they turn 22 and leave the school district. They're going to be reevaluated a minimum of every 3 years. So they have to redo all those tests every 3 years. Yeah.
Is that every school year or every calendar year?
I think it's calendar year. Yeah. I mean, if they repeat kindergarten or something, it's still going to be every 3 years. There are some occasions where you might want to reevaluate more frequently than that, and you can if there's a need. They can only do it a minimum of once a year, or a maximum of once a year, minimum of once every 3 years. And there's a risk of asking them to reevaluate sooner, as they could find they no longer qualify, right? So be thoughtful about that. Okay, questions about this whole process? Any surprises on here? Sounds like the progress reports may have been a bit of a surprise to some. Everything else sort of align with your experience? Okay. As promised, let's talk about data, a highlight. This was a big eye-opener for me when I started learning how special ed works. Schools speak the language of data. If I go to a school meeting and say, I'm really concerned about how my kid's doing, he doesn't seem happy, he's this, that, and this, they would say, well, he's meeting his goals. The data looks fine. And I have often, for years, felt like we were talking and having two separate conversations. I'm talking about my son's well-being, and they're talking about data. And then I realized that if I could phrase my concerns in the form of data, they might pay attention to me a little bit more, and it's actually a really effective way to affect change. So let's talk about what that means. Assessment data, the data they do in those 3-year assessments every year, really powerful information for us to learn about our kid, how they learn, what their strengths are, what their challenges are. That data should be used to write IEP goals, to design accommodations. They should be used to inform the IEP. We don't just write an IEP, every autistic third grader gets this. We write it based on these, evaluation results. Any change in the IEP should be informed with data. And this can be used if you want to request a change. It can also be used if you want to slow down the school who wants to make a change. So I'll give you an example. When my son started ninth grade, he moved from middle school to high school. It was a rough few weeks, the first few weeks of school, and his teacher approached me and said, we want to update his IEP to add a one-on-one aid for him. And I said, well, I don't want that because he used to have a one-on-one aid. We've moved away from that. I don't want to go backwards like that. And she said, well, it's not really your decision. It's an IEP team decision. I know. I know. I had all that. I made that same face, but she was true. It was true. She's telling the truth. It was an IEP team decision. So she said, it's not your decision. It's an IEP team decision. What I'm going to do is collect data for a month. I'm going to track the minutes and find out how many minutes a day he's actually demanding the use of an aid. Like how many minutes a day we have to pull an aid off of some other kid because he's needing it. And in a month, we will all come together, we'll look at the data, and we'll decide as a team whether he needs a para or not. I don't like being told it's not your decision. I want it to be my decision, but it isn't ultimately. And I did appreciate her slowing her roll. Like, people want to make these impulsive changes. And if you can say, well, if they call you up and say, we're changing X, Y, and Z, a really good answer is, what data did you use to make that decision? Or what data are you using to determine that solution is going to work better than this solution? We shouldn't be making, the team, us included, but the whole team should not be making decisions based on gut or instinct. It should be, there's that too. It's an art as much as anything else, but it's also a science, and there's this data. Data can also be used to request change. If you think say they assign your kid 20 minutes a week of speech therapy, and you're like, he's an 8th grader with no words. Why is he getting 20 minutes a week? It's ridiculous. They're going to say, well, that's what we give people. 20 minutes is what we think he needs to work on this goal. So you might let 6 months go by, collect a few progress reports, notice that, well, he's still not making any progress on those speech goals, and you would use that data to request more minutes for speech. Does that make sense? It's in the IEP. If they're actually doing it, good question. And for those of us whose kids can't tell us, that can get very tricky. You have a right anytime to request the data. What data are they I told you they're following after the kid. Is he putting his jacket on? You have the right to ask, can I see that jacket data anytime? So if you have question, is he actually seeing that speech therapist? Like, I've heard stories of families where they go on maternity leave and no one ever notifies the family, and 6 months go by without speech therapy. If you have question about that, you can ask to see the goals data. I think there's also supposed to be a log of when they go. But one way you might know is that they're not making progress on those goals, if nothing else. Yeah.
If it says they're supposed to have 20 minutes and they're doing 10.
Right.
That's. They write down 20.
Yeah.
They're the ones writing.
That's the hard part. I don't know if everyone can hear. He's saying, what if they're entitled to 20, but they're only really getting 10 and they're just writing 20? That's the hard part. And I think a big part of this is trust. And I'm not telling you to blindly trust, because I think we've all had our trust broken. I think a big part of this is building trust, getting to the point with a team where when they tell us it's 20 minutes, we can trust that they mean it. When I hear families calling me and saying, and I don't think they are even getting their 20 minutes, what that says to me is there has been some major trust broken at some point down the line, or in the past. If that is a concern of yours, I would definitely be pursuing it, because it happens. And if one of those things happen where the speech therapist is on maternity leave and your kid hasn't gotten therapy for months, they're entitled to compensation for it. Yeah.
In my IEP, my was anything that I wanted to add or change
Uh-huh.
or anything. I said, I don't like how we only get progress reports, like when report cards go out.
Mm-hmm.
So I put in there that they will send me a monthly progress report.
That's awesome. And they were willing to do that.
Yeah.
That's great.
So,
I mean,
that might be a work, like to.
that's another way
like,
to keep an eye
are
on
they,
things.
doing what
Yeah.
they should be doing to actually keep track of it.
Right. I think that's, I mean, you ever, my secret tip to families is always to ask to see the data. Because if they don't have the data, that means they're not doing it. And that is like an automatic compensatory services. And when I say compensation, they're not giving out money. To be clear, it's extra they make it up to you. They give you the extra therapies you missed, essentially. Okay, so let me make sure I got all of the rest of this. SMART goals you've probably noticed the IEP goals are written in such a convoluted, very hyper-specific style. They're SMART goals. They're specific, they're measurable, attainable, realistic, and time-bound. So I once saw an IEP goal that said something like, we'll get better at greeting his peers. That's not a good IEP goal because we don't know where he started. We don't know where he'll land, where we want him to land. We also don't know in what setting are we talking about. And we also don't know who's measuring what better is. There's a lot of cultural, unspoken stuff in how we greet peers. So these goals get very specific, and that helps them track data and measure if they're making progress. Okay, questions about this? I think I got all of it. Okay, I hope one of your big takeaways from this is to form your complaint or your concern in Jeopardy, it's like say it in the form of a question. And here it's like say it in the form of data. Bring it back to, if they're proposing something that you're like, this is never gonna work. I know my kid, this is a terrible idea. Instead of saying, this is never gonna work, I know my kid is a terrible idea, say, there's no way he's gonna make progress on that jacket goal with that setting or with that lack of support. You have to bring it back to the progress on the goals and as specific on the goals as you can. He has 3 goals around communication. How is he gonna learn to talk in a room with no kids who can talk? That kind of thing. You wanna bring it back to that conversation, to how is he gonna make progress on these goals? Or I'm looking at the data and he's not making progress on these goals. Okay, data. You feel good about that? Okay. It's so nice talking in person. I'm teaching virtually almost all the time, and everyone has their cameras off, and then I don't know if they know if I'm making any sense to people or not, so I appreciate the nods. Okay, so let's talk about placement. It's one of the chief concerns I hear from parents. What kind of classroom is he going to be in? Is it going to be a regular kindergarten class with 25 neurotypical kids and my kid, or 25 kids, including my kids, some of them with IEPs, some of them without? Or is it going to be what they might call a center-based classroom, a self-contained classroom that is just for kids with certain kinds of disabilities, and that there's way less kids and way more staff and a way more specialized kind of environment? The first thing I want to say about that is that inclusive education, where a student is in their general education setting with their gen ed peers, is a legally supported, evidence-based best practice that research shows improves outcomes for all students, neurotypical and disabled. It's their right to be in their gen ed classroom as much as possible. And what that means is as much as they can meet their goals. So if you have goals and they're in gen ed and they're not meeting them no matter what you try, then at some point they're gonna say this isn't working. But it's supposed to start with all students trying gen ed. So let me tell you how special ed is supposed to work in terms of placement. The state is required to provide a continuum of care. Regular old kindergarten or regular old school for 90% of the kids. That's the first thing. Then there's have to have a more slightly more restrictive self-contained program. Then maybe they have a program where he's bused across town to a locked facility. That's even more restrictive. Or maybe he's sent to a residential program where he doesn't get to come home. That's even more restrictive. The state has to provide all of those. But they're not supposed to start here. We don't just like take kids and lock them up. We start here. We see how they do. We try everything we possibly can for them to succeed with their gen ed peers. And then we get more restrictive as needed. That's ideally how it works. For my son, he came right out of preschool and they said, no, he is not good. He should not be in gen ed. We're going to put him in the self-contained classroom. I was new at this. I didn't know to say no to that. And now I am not here to say self-contained programs are bad. And actually, he is in one now, and it has been since middle school. It's been great for him. There's really strong benefits to all different programs. I really believe it's an individualized decision that a team should make about this particular kid. But I do think we way too quickly assume some kids can't succeed in gen ed, when many, many kids can. And actually, my son did great in gen ed from kindergarten through 5th grade. And he did that. He entered kindergarten and left 5th grade without knowing how to read or write. So he has significant disabilities. He was the most disabled in his class. They were still able to provide, he still made progress on his goals. He did all the things. It's a doable situation and evidence-based and legally supported. Okay, wait, I said all of this. The way you're gonna make a change of placement is going back to what I just talked about with data. If you're saying, my kid's been in self-contained program for a long time, I really want him to move to gen ed, it's time. What I sometimes hear from the schools is, well, I wanna do some testing to see if he's ready. And the thing to know is that there's no ready. There's no document anywhere that says what skills a kid needs to have to be in a general education classroom. Everyone theoretically can be a gen ed student. Everyone shows up to kindergarten. We don't know what they're capable of at that point. So let's talk about 5 ways not to determine placement. Placement should not be determined prior to writing the IEP. So the first thing they're going to do is take all that evaluation data. You're going to all work together to create an IEP that you all agree with, writing all these goals. And then you're going to say, well, now we've written these goals. We know everything about this kid. What is the best placement for him to meet these goals? And that would be then the conversation as a team. Gen ed, special ed, you'd have that conversation. But it's not going to be had before the IEP is written. You're not going to determine placement based on diagnosis or labels or IEP categories. So we're not going to say all autistic kids go here. And I've heard of that. That's a medically fragile classroom. That's an autism classroom. That's a non-speaking classroom. Those classrooms are okay. There's nothing illegal about it. But we're not going to automatically funnel every kid into it. We're going to have a conversation. Is this the right space for that student? We're not going to make a decision based on severity of the disability. You can be working on your own goals in whatever classroom you're in. My son, just as an example, they did a unit about photosynthesis, like about the things, not photosynthesis, what a seed needs to grow. And it's like, soil, water, and sunshine or whatever. The 3rd grade class, they learned more in depth. My son's adaptation or modification of that was to learn the 3 things that a seed needs to grow. They entered it into his iPad so that when the teacher asked the classroom who can share what a seed needs to grow, he was able to raise his hand and press the buttons. So he's learning things. He's learning at his own pace, but he's in a general education 3rd grade class. The severity of his disability was not what determined where he was. Same with lack of resources, like it would be too expensive for him to be in that class, or all the experts are in this other class, so he'd be better there. Or it would just be so difficult. I got a lot of that. It's just gonna be really hard to try to find a way to make it work for him. None of that is legally supported. I don't know if anyone, I got one of these with just so afraid he's gonna, you gotta be immune to that stuff eventually. Also, number 5, we've always done it this way. Well, I've been here 30 years and this is how we've always done it. Kids like him are always in that classroom and they do great and they love it. That may be true, but this is my kid and we're gonna talk about it as him like an individual. What are your thoughts on that? Does that feel helpful? It's always, again, going to come down to where is he going to meet his goals. So if you want to have a conversation with them about changing placement, either from gen ed to special ed or special ed to gen ed, the focus of the conversation should be where is he going to meet his goals. Okay, let's go on to behavior. I just want to repeat, our kids are the schools are required to teach our kids, and our kids are entitled to learn, no matter how difficult our kids make it for them. I don't want my kid to make it difficult, but he is disabled, and that's sometimes what happens. Part of his disability is what happens. I believe that behavior is communication. When our kids are acting out, they're usually trying to tell us something. And I really believe that they deserve the dignity of us taking the time to dig in and figure out what it's about. That we're not assuming this is naughtiness or belligerence, but that there's maybe more going on. So when I have a parent who is getting a million phone calls from the school about behavior, or come pick him up, he's acting out, or we can't teach him, he's not behaving well. The first thing I would say is to request a functional behavior assessment, if that hasn't already been done. That's an in-depth assessment of their behavior. In my personal experience and in my professional experience, they don't offer these enough, and they resist when you ask for them because I think they're time-consuming. But if their behavior is interfering with their learning or the learning of others, which is what the threshold is, then they should do a functional behavior assessment. It's where they study, it's the ABCs, the antecedent, the behavior, and the consequence. So if your kid is always melting down in 3rd period, they're gonna go to 3rd period and study, well, what's happening right before she melts down? Oh wait, there's these fluorescent lights that are really awful in that classroom and there's a buzz. And we realize when she doesn't go to that classroom, she doesn't melt down. So that would all be in a functional behavior assessment. Then they would use that to create a behavior plan. That behavior plan is a document that attaches right to the back of an IEP that says, this is what they need to support their behavior. It's mostly preventative. It's not, it might also include, this is what you do if they start misbehaving. But it's a lot about, this is how we keep them happy. This is how we keep them comfortable in their body. This is how we keep them sensory safe, not overwhelmed. We know that there's a buzz in those lights that gets her upset. So we make sure so the behavior plan is gonna indicate she should have headphones available to her in 3rd period every time. Basic stuff like that. Like an IEP, a behavior plan is a living document. If there's a behavior plan implemented and 3-4 weeks go by, 5 weeks, and you're still getting calls all the time, that tells me the behavior plan needs to be modified. And I would call the team together and ask and say, it's not working. What are we gonna try next? They have to keep trying. And that's the important part. Like, you don't have to be satisfied with just getting those phone calls all the time. They have to keep trying, and they have to bring in experts, bring in specialists, ultimately send them to a private school, send them to a residential school. Like, not that we want that, but ultimately they are really on the hook to teach our kids and to figure it out. If they call and tell you to pick him up, I would probably go pick him up the first time or maybe the second time. But after that, I would be having a meeting and figuring this out because I have other things I have to do. I can't be picking him up all day. There are some exceptions. If he has a weapon or is threatening the safety of other people, they will call the police. And if you don't want the police involved, then you should go pick them up quickly, would be my guess. One last thing to know about behavior, students with disabilities cannot be suspended for behavior that's a result of their disability. So I love to tell this. My son loves to give people the finger. He does it all day, every day. And it's sort of like a tick almost. He doesn't have a lot of language. So when he's angry, when he's mad at you, when he wants you to know you've pissed him off, he gives you the finger. If my neurotypical, it's pretty funny, but also like if he was neurotypical and running around school giving the finger to his teachers, he would probably get suspended. We know that this is because of his disability. He has these impulse control issues, he has language issues. There are probably consequences. I hope when he does it at school, they tell him not to, or maybe there's repercussions, but he's not getting suspended. He's not missing instruction time. He's not being sent home from school. If a student is sent home halfway through a day, if you go and pick them up because of their behavior, that's a suspension. And if there's 10 suspensions, not even consecutive, but just in the course of a year, they have to do a manifestation determination where there's a hearing to determine if it was his disability that caused the behavior. And if it was, then he gets compensatory services for the time he missed, if that makes sense. If that makes sense. If your kid is being sent home and it's because of their disability, call me. Let's work on that. I don't want that happening to anyone.
I have a question around like behavior, but also like least restrictive environment.
Yep. Mm-hmm.
If you know your child could be successful in a gen ed classroom with like a one-on-one parent educator, is that like a reasonable accommodation? Because I know the school district's response is going to be like, well, they're really hard to hire.
Yeah, so I see differences by
expensive,
district
so
for
we're gonna
sure.
put them in a self-contained classroom.
I hear that all the time. I see major differences by district in that regard. What they used to say, and I still hear them say this sometimes, is being in gen ed with a one-on-one is more restrictive than being in a self-contained classroom with like a 1-to-2 or a 1-to-4. Do you follow what I'm saying? Mm-hmm. But people went to court and sued, and that was shot down. So gen ed with a one-on-one is less restrictive than a self-contained classroom with 1-to-4 or whatever. It is hard. It can be hard to convince the school that that's what's best for them, because it is way more expensive. One of the things I've heard advised that I share is a one-on-one is a full-time position. That means they're greeting your kid when they get off the bus in the morning, they're with your kid 7 hours straight, and then they're put your kid back on the bus. Many kids need one-on-one attention at various times in the day, but not everyone needs one all day. And if you say to the team, I want a full-time one-on-one aide, they see dollar signs. If you say, well, he needs a one-on-one aide at these certain times to ensure his safety or to ensure his focus or whatever, and then I want to have a fade plan because my goal is ultimately that he doesn't need an aide, I'm not giving any timeline. That fade plan might be 8 years. But I'm saying to the school, I'm open to consider that one day he doesn't need this, but today he does. That can sometimes be helpful. But I do hear some districts, it's like almost a non-starter, and it's going to be up to you how much you want to fight it, I think. And then there's some districts where they're eliminating self-contained classrooms. And this is in Lake Washington and Issaquah, this has been going on, where all kids are gen ed students, and the parents aren't happy in that situation either because there's not enough resources, there's not enough support. So yes, it can be difficult to like get the placement. And I think for a lot of us, there's no right one. Gen ed wasn't the right fit, self-contained wasn't exactly the right fit. School was designed before disabled kids were allowed to go to school. It was not designed for our kids, is what I think a lot. Okay, I want to just go through this really quick. Our state gives you dispute resolution options. If you don't agree, if the school says we're putting him in a self-contained program and you're like, no, you are not, they're going to do it anyway, like I already told you. So your options, these are your options of what to do. You can request facilitation. You can request a neutral third party come to your IEP and lead the conversation. If you leave a meeting sometimes and you're like, what just happened? It went so fast. I didn't ever get to say anything. No one listened when I spoke. My voice wasn't heard. A facilitator can be really helpful. You also have the option for mediation, and these are free options, where a third party, neutral third party comes in and does mediation. So if they say, the school says, Gen Ed, you say self-contained and you can't find an agreement, a mediator will come in and work with you to help you find an agreement. Schools don't want this, it takes forever. So sometimes just threatening it is enough to get, it's like a 6-hour process. The school does not want to do that. So sometimes I'll say, I would hate to have to go towards mediation. I wonder if we can find a solution to this. That could be helpful. Was there a question? No, okay. You have a right, I'm going through it fast because I know we're pretty much out of time. You have a right to file a community complaint. That's a free complaint. You just file. It's a easy form to fill out and submit to the state and the district saying there's a law that you broke, or there's something on the IEP you didn't do. He hasn't been getting speech for the last 6 months. That would be how you'd complain about that.
Does that include any citizen, like even employees of the district?
That's a good question. I don't know. Probably. I haven't seen a school district employee file a community complaint, but that would be great. I'd love to see that. It makes them puts them in a whistleblower sort of position. I've had whistleblower teachers, they've called me and said bad shit's going on. Excuse my language. This isn't good, could you get involved? But they don't always want to jump. That's right. They could be in a tough situation. I filed a community complaint around my son not getting services during COVID, and he ended up getting about a year of free tutoring at the special program. So that's the kind of thing that can come out of these complaints. And when I did it, they subpoenaed all my emails. They did a pretty thorough investigation. You could request a due process hearing. That's essentially filing a lawsuit. By the time you get to this, you're going to probably want a lawyer. The schools will have their lawyers at that point. You're very likely to lose, I hate to tell you. The statistics show you have a 70% chance of losing, or if you have a lawyer, you have a 60% chance of losing, or something like that. So, yeah.
I was going to say, when you do bring up the word lawyer, the schools absolutely stop
Yep,
communicating with you.
they do.
They will stop. Oh, you said lawyer? We are done.
Yeah, they start being, I encourage, this has a place. A lot of what has the positive changes to school is because of people filing lawsuits. We know that. But we also know it's miserable, it's expensive, you usually lose, it doesn't always go well, and in the meantime, there's this emotional cost to it. So I just tell parents to be really thoughtful before you start throwing lawyer around, throwing lawsuit around. Your relationship will likely never recover. Your relationship with the district is what I've heard. I've never done this, but it is an option for you. If you show up with a lawyer without telling them, they will cancel them. I've seen it happen. They just shut down the meeting. They will not talk to you. Then you also have a right to file a complaint with the Office of Civil Rights if you think they're being discriminated against because of their disability. For example, if they say, we don't take kids with disabilities on field trips. You hear things like that. We don't have enough staff and we can't provide the medical care. That would be a discrimination.
What if they don't have enough staff? If you look at the websites for almost any school district, there's about 30 open.
Yeah, so you make a really good point. He said, what if they don't have enough staff? As an advocate, I'll say, too bad, they have to get it. They're entitled to, and maybe they have to pay more, maybe they have to offer more benefits. But if it's in the IEP, they have to do it, and if they don't, they're out of compliance. So that's the advocate in me. The realist in me knows, yeah, they don't have enough staff. We know with COVID, there was major staffing issues. As a parent, I would say, stay on the advocate side. It is up to them to figure it out. I'm not going to be mean to them. I'm not going to curse at them or call them names or insult them, but I'm going to make them either do what my kid is required to do, entitled to have, or I'm going to get compensation for it. And they just have to figure it out. I'm not going to be mean about it, but it's what it is. I think we're out of time, so I won't open this for discussion, but I will just say your relationship with the IEP team, it means a lot. When you like start in kindergarten through 6th grade, you're with that team, or through 5th grade for like 6 years. If you go in kindergarten like a bull in a china shop and yelling and criticizing and yet complaining to everyone, you have a right to do that. And in some ways, you know, they'll listen to you. You'll make them scared of you. But it's going to be a tense, hard, stressful 6 years. Same if they become your best friends, then it's a lot harder to give feedback. So that could also make it a tough 6 years. Just be thoughtful is what I say. It's okay to get angry. It's okay to cry in a meeting. All of that's fine. I don't think it's okay to lose your cool. I was at a meeting once where a mom was there very justifyingly angry about something. But as she was telling what she was angry about, she started letting loose with some F-bombs. Well, that did not help. And the team basically put a stop to the meeting. Meeting ended. That was that. Then she had to go on this like apology tour for the next few weeks afterwards, telling everyone how sorry she was. And her issue that she was right about got long forgotten. So let that be a cautionary tale. Don't lose it. Be in control. You could be angry, you can cry, but be in control. And be thoughtful, because it's hard to work with a team you don't get along with. I will share this with you. This is just a bunch of resources for you. And this is us at the bottom, our parent partner program. We can match you with a parent partner who can support you and maybe attend a meeting with you. And here's my contact information. Please feel free to reach out with questions if there's anything I talked about that you want to talk about in more detail. And I am happy, I don't know what time it is, but I'm happy to answer more questions. 7:13?
30.
30. Oh, perfect. That's when I was aiming to end. Oh, no, 7:45, I think was.
7:15.
7:15? Oh, sorry. Okay.
The kids are getting a little antsy.
Go to your kids. It's late.
We got a text from the team like,
Oh, are we
crazy.
Okay, I'm done. You're released. Thank you so much for having me, you guys. I hope you have a great evening. I'm sorry that the kids are getting antsy.
Thanks, Rachel.
Yeah.
Yes. Oh, I forgot to hand it. You know, I have the sign-in sheets too. Shoot, I'll just get it. Yes. They know that you're here,